Move her away from the guests right now. Sabrina Monroe covered her nose with a silk napkin as the ballroom fell silent. Crystal chandeliers glowed above hundreds of rich faces. Expensive perfume filled the air. But every eye turned toward Naomi Carter. The young waitress stood frozen beside a tray of champagne. Her faded uniform clung to her thin body. Her hands shook so badly that one glass slipped and shattered across the marble floor. A few guests laughed immediately. "That smell is disgusting," a woman whispered loudly. "Why would they hire someone like her?" another guest muttered. Naomi lowered her head fast. She already knew what came next. Sabrina stepped closer in high heels, cold and perfect under the golden lights. "You embarrassed this entire gala," she snapped. "Do you know who is here tonight?" Naomi swallowed hard. "I am sorry, ma'am. Please. I just need this job." "Need?" Sabrina laughed. "You smell like a dirty alley." More laughter spread through the ballroom. Phones slowly lifted into the air. Some guests recorded her humiliation openly. Naomi tried to steady her breathing. She could still smell the chemical medicine on her clothes. The scent never left anymore. Not after the hospital. Not after the long nights beside her mother's bed. She had washed this uniform 3 times in a public sink before work. Still, it was not enough. Nothing was ever enough. "Please," Naomi whispered again. "My mother needs her medicine tonight." Sabrina rolled her eyes. "Then stay away from wealthy people." A waiter beside Naomi looked uncomfortable. For one second, it seemed like he might defend her. But Sabrina glanced at him once. He immediately looked away. Silence. Cowardly silence. Naomi's fingers tightened around her old bag. Inside it were unpaid hospital bills, a cracked phone, and one folded cloth she never let go of. The old white handkerchief carried a faded blue logo. Hayes Global. She kept it hidden carefully. A strange thing to protect when her entire life was falling apart. "Security," Sabrina said sharply. "Take her out before the investors arrive." 2 guards started walking toward Naomi. Panic flashed across her face. "Please do not fire me," she begged softly. "I will clean everything. I will stay invisible. Please." "Invisible?" Sabrina leaned closer. "People like you should already know their place." A man near the stage chuckled. "She probably came here for free food." Another voice followed. "Or to steal." Naomi's eyes filled with tears instantly. But she refused to cry loudly. She refused to break in front of them. "I did not steal anything," she said quietly. "I only came to work." "Then explain the smell," Sabrina shot back. Naomi opened her mouth. Closed it again. How could she explain poverty to people who spent thousands on flowers for one dinner? How could she explain sleeping beside chemical machines in a crowded hospital ward? Or carrying her sick mother after double shifts because there was no wheelchair available? Her silence only made the crowd judge harder. A young woman near the front covered her nose dramatically. Laughter exploded again. Naomi's breathing became uneven now. One guard grabbed her arm gently but firmly. "Come with us." "Please," Naomi whispered again. "My mother is waiting for me. I need tonight's pay." Sabrina folded her arms. "You should have thought about that before contaminating my event." The word contaminating hit harder than a slap. Naomi looked around desperately. Hundreds of rich faces. Diamonds. Black suits. Cameras. Cold eyes. Nobody wanted truth. They only wanted someone lower than themselves. Then a tiny voice suddenly broke through the noise. "She gave me her food outside." The ballroom quieted for half a second. A little boy stood near one of the guest tables. Yesterday, he added nervously. I was crying near the hotel door. Naomi looked shocked. She recognized him immediately. The child of one of the guests. Sabrina's face darkened instantly. Enough, she snapped. Children imagine things. The tiny hope disappeared just as quickly as it came. The mother pulled her son away. Guests started whispering again. Naomi lowered her eyes once more. One guard picked up her old bag roughly. Papers spilled across the marble floor. Hospital bills. Prescription forms. And the old white handkerchief slid out slowly beneath the chandelier light. A man standing near the ballroom entrance suddenly stopped walking. Tall. Calm. Dark suit. Sharp eyes. Jordan Hayes. The CEO's son had just arrived. His gaze moved past the crowd, and locked directly onto the faded Hayes Global logo stitched into Naomi's trembling handkerchief. The entire room went silent when he finally spoke. Stop laughing, Jordan said coldly. Let her talk. Jordan Hayes did not raise his voice. He did not move fast either. But the entire ballroom changed the moment he stepped closer to Naomi Carter. The laughter faded first. Then the whispers. Even the guards loosened their grip on her arms. Naomi stood frozen beneath the chandelier lights, breathing unevenly. Tears burned in her eyes, but she kept lowering her head, trying to disappear inside her faded uniform. Jordan bent slowly and picked up the old white handkerchief from the marble floor. His fingers paused the second he saw the blue Hayes Global logo stitched into the corner. Old fabric. Worn edges. Not fake. His expression changed for one brief second. Sabrina noticed immediately. Mr. Hayes, she said quickly, forcing a smile. This girl caused a scene in front of our investors. Jordan kept staring at the cloth. Where did you get this? Naomi swallowed hard. It belonged to my mother. Silence. A strange silence. Jordan finally looked up at her properly now. Not at her clothes. Not at the stains on her sleeves. At her face. Her tired eyes. Her trembling hands. Her exhaustion. Your mother worked for Hayes Global, he asked quietly. Naomi hesitated. A long time ago. Sabrina cut in instantly. People say many things when they want sympathy. Several guests nodded. The pressure returned immediately. Naomi gripped her old bag tightly against her chest. Inside were unpaid hospital bills and the last prescription for her mother's treatment. She looked so small standing among diamonds and black tuxedos. Jordan noticed that too. Why do you smell like chemicals? He asked calmly. Naomi's face flushed with shame. The ballroom grew uncomfortable again. Some guests covered their noses dramatically. Because I clean my mother's wounds myself, Naomi whispered. The medicine stays on my clothes. No one spoke. For one moment, the rich ballroom felt colder than before. Jordan's eyes narrowed slightly. What hospital? St. Mercy Public Ward. Another pause. A deeper one this time. Jordan slowly repeated the name in his mind. St. Mercy. The old district. The same district connected to a factory accident his father once erased from public discussion years ago. Sabrina stepped forward fast. Mr. Hayes, with respect, this is not the time for random stories. I did not ask you, Jordan replied coldly. The room fell silent again. Naomi looked shocked. Nobody had defended her all night. Not once. A waiter near the back lowered his eyes in guilt. One older woman at a table finally whispered, the girl looks sick herself. Tiny hope. Tiny mercy. But Sabrina crushed it immediately. She should not be near wealthy guests, she snapped. Imagine the diseases she could carry. Naomi flinched like she had been slapped. I am not dirty, she whispered weakly. I just work 2 jobs. Then buy soap, a guest muttered. Laughter returned again, softer now, uglier somehow. Jordan looked around the ballroom slowly. Expensive watches. Gold jewelry. Crystal glasses. And in the middle of it all stood one terrified girl trying not to cry because she needed money to keep her mother alive. The contrast made something inside him shift. Naomi suddenly received a call. Her cracked phone vibrated violently in her shaking hands. Mama, she whispered when she answered. The ballroom could hear coughing through the speaker. Weak coughing. Painful coughing. Naomi, Evelyn Carter's voice trembled. Did you get the medicine? Naomi turned away quickly, ashamed. Not yet. Please come soon, her mother whispered before another coughing fit hit hard. The call ended. Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second. That single second broke more hearts than all the insults before it. Jordan looked at the unpaid prescription papers near her feet. He saw the amount circled in red ink. Too much money for someone like her. Too little money for people in this room to even notice. If you are watching from somewhere in the world right now, tell me honestly. Do you believe Naomi is telling the truth? Or do you think the rich crowd is right about her? Sarima crossed her arms again. This emotional act is over. She turned to security. Remove her now. One guard stepped closer. Naomi backed away instinctively. Jordan spoke without looking at Sarima. Nobody touches her. Another silence. Dangerous this time. Sabrina's smile weakened slightly. Mr. Hayes, investors are watching. Jordan ignored her completely. His eyes stayed on Naomi's hospital papers. One document had partially slipped from the folder. A faded hospital intake form. Old. Water damaged. But one line was still visible beneath the crease. Hayes Industrial Chemical Exposure Unit. Jordan's face changed instantly. Marcus Reed, his assistant, stepped closer behind him. Sir. Jordan held up the paper slowly. Why would St. Mercy connect her mother to Hayes Industrial? Naomi looked confused now. I do not know, she whispered. Sabrina's face lost color for half a second. Tiny. But Jordan saw it. Then another voice suddenly echoed across the ballroom. A frightened little boy pointed directly at Naomi. That lady cried outside the old factory too. The room went completely silent. Jordan turned sharply toward the child. What factory? Before the boy could answer, Sarima rushed forward. Enough. But Jordan was already staring at Naomi differently now. Not like a waitress. Not like a problem. Like a question nobody had answered in years. Then he looked at Marcus and said quietly, find out everything about Evelyn Carter. Tonight. Find out everything about Evelyn Carter. Tonight. Jordan Hayes turned away from the ballroom slowly after giving the order. Naomi stood frozen under the chandelier light, still clutching her torn bag against her chest. Guests whispered around her like she was invisible again. But now the whispers sounded different. Curious. Suspicious. Dangerous. Sarima Monroe noticed it too. Her smile never fully returned after Jordan left. Take her out, she snapped coldly. Now. Naomi lowered her eyes and quietly bent down to gather her scattered hospital papers from the floor. Her hands shook badly. One paper had a red stamp across it. Payment overdue. Another showed the cost of Evelyn Carter's medicine for the week. Impossible numbers for someone like Naomi. One guard walked her toward the back exit of the hotel. The warm golden ballroom disappeared behind her. Outside, cold night air hit her face instantly. Luxury cars lined the front entrance. Drivers waited beside polished black SUVs. Rich guests laughed beneath sparkling lights. Naomi walked past them in silence wearing old shoes with cracked soles. Her stomach hurt from hunger. She had not eaten since morning. But all she could think about was her mother waiting alone. 20 minutes later, Naomi stepped into a crowded public bus carrying her old bag against her chest. The city slowly changed outside the dirty window. Bright towers disappeared. Expensive restaurants disappeared. Then came broken sidewalks. Rusted fences. Small apartments with flickering lights. St. Mercy District. Naomi finally reached the old building she called home. Rainwater stains covered the hallway walls. Someone had stolen half the lights again. Upstairs, coughing echoed behind a thin apartment door. "Mama?" Naomi rushed inside immediately. Evelyn Carter lay weakly on a narrow bed beside an old fan that barely worked. Medicine bottles sat nearly empty beside her pillow. The room smelled like sickness, soap, and chemical ointment. Naomi's eyes softened instantly. This was why she endured humiliation. This was why she stayed quiet. "Did they pay you tonight?" Evelyn asked weakly. Naomi forced a small smile that did not reach her eyes. "Not yet." Evelyn noticed the tears immediately. "They hurt you again." Naomi looked away fast. Silence answered everything. Evelyn slowly touched Naomi's hand. "You do not deserve shame, baby." Naomi finally broke a little. "I just wanted to keep the job." Her voice cracked softly. "I thought maybe this time people would not look at me like I was dirty." Evelyn coughed painfully. Naomi rushed to help her sit up. Even the medicine cloth around Evelyn's shoulder carried the same chemical smell from the hospital ward. The smell rich people mocked without understanding. "We still have each other," Evelyn whispered. Naomi nodded quickly before tears could fall again. Then somebody banged hard on the apartment door. "Rent," a man shouted angrily. Naomi froze. Evelyn lowered her eyes immediately. The landlord pushed the door halfway open without permission. "Tomorrow morning," he warned. "Or both of you leave." Naomi stood up fast. "Please. I just need more time. Time does not pay bills." Slam. The door closed again. Silence filled the room afterward. Naomi slowly opened her bag and counted the little cash she had left. Not enough for rent. Not enough for medicine. Barely enough for bread. Her cracked phone suddenly lit up. Unknown number. Naomi hesitated before answering. "Miss Carter," a calm male voice asked. "This is Marcus Reed from Hayes Global." Naomi's face tightened instantly. "I do not want trouble," she whispered. "Mr. Hayes only wants to ask questions." "Why?" "Because your mother's name appeared in an old company record." Naomi looked at Evelyn immediately. Fear crossed her mother's tired face for the first time all night. "Do not tell them anything," Evelyn whispered suddenly. Marcus continued speaking through the phone. "There was an industrial accident years ago connected to St. Mercy District." Naomi's breathing slowed. "My mother was never part of that." Evelyn grabbed Naomi's wrist tightly. Too tightly. "End the call." Naomi obeyed immediately. Her hands trembled afterward. In another part of the city, Jordan Hayes stood alone inside his dark office overlooking thousands of glowing lights below. Marcus placed a damaged file folder onto the desk. "Most records were erased," Marcus said quietly. Jordan opened the folder slowly. Inside was an old hospital intake sheet. Chemical exposure victim. Female. Name partially destroyed by water damage. But one thing remained visible. A faded photograph clipped to the corner. Jordan stared at it silently. The woman in the picture looked painfully familiar. Same tired eyes. Same face shape. Same quiet sadness Naomi carried tonight. Sir, Marcus said carefully, there is more. Jordan looked up slowly. Marcus placed another item onto the desk. An old newspaper clipping. Factory leak covered by Hayes Industrial. One name had been circled in black ink years ago. Evelyn Carter. Back inside the apartment, Naomi carefully removed the white Hayes handkerchief from her bag. Hidden beneath it was something else. A small old photograph folded in half. One side showed a younger Evelyn smiling beside a man whose face had been torn away from the picture completely. Suddenly Evelyn whispered weakly from the bed, half asleep, half terrified. Do not let the Hayes family find out about your father. Naomi's eyes widened slowly. Then another knock echoed through the apartment door. This time softer. Stranger. Naomi walked toward it carefully. And when she opened the door, a frightened older woman stood outside holding a dusty storage box against her chest. I knew your mother years ago, the woman whispered nervously. And somebody is trying to destroy the truth before you find it. The older woman stepped inside Naomi's apartment slowly, clutching the dusty storage box so tightly her fingers trembled. Rain dripped from her coat onto the cracked floor. Evelyn Carter stared at her in shock from the bed. Lorraine, Evelyn whispered weakly. Naomi looked between them in confusion. You know her? Lorraine nodded slowly, her eyes already wet. I worked at Hayes Industrial 20 years ago. Silence filled the tiny apartment immediately. Outside, thunder rolled over St. Mercy District. Naomi's heartbeat quickened. Jordan Hayes stood in his glass office downtown at the same moment, staring again at the old newspaper clipping under cold white lights. Marcus Reed remained beside him holding another damaged folder. The records do not match, Marcus said carefully. Someone changed employee identities after the chemical leak. Jordan's jaw tightened slightly. Find out who approved it. Back inside the apartment, Lorraine slowly placed the dusty box onto Naomi's small kitchen table. Old papers. Yellow photographs. Hospital records tied with faded string. Naomi stared at them nervously. Why are you bringing this now? Lorraine lowered her voice instantly. Because somebody has started asking questions again. Evelyn suddenly coughed hard. Fear crossed her tired face. You should not have come here. Lorraine ignored her and carefully opened the box. Inside was an old employee badge from Hayes Industrial. Naomi froze immediately. The woman in the faded photo looked exactly like her mother years ago. Younger. Smiling. Healthy. Beside her stood a tall man wearing a Hayes Company jacket. But his face had been scratched out violently. Who did that? Naomi whispered. Lorraine looked toward Evelyn first before answering. Your mother tried to protect someone. Naomi's breathing became uneven. Protect who? Before Lorraine could answer, Evelyn spoke sharply for the first time. Enough. The room fell silent again. Naomi looked at her mother in pain. Mama, why are you hiding things from me? Evelyn slowly lowered her eyes. Because the truth destroyed lives once already. Downtown, Jordan pressed pause on an old security recording Marcus had recovered from company archives. Grainy footage filled the screen. Workers running. Smoke everywhere. Then Jordan leaned closer suddenly. A young woman appeared on camera carrying a child wrapped in a blanket through the chaos. Same eyes. Same face shape as Naomi. Marcus noticed Jordan's expression immediately. Sir. Jordan spoke quietly. Enhance her necklace. Seconds later, the blurry image sharpened slightly. A silver pendant shaped like a small flower. Jordan reached slowly into his desk drawer and removed the white handkerchief Naomi dropped at the gala. Wrapped inside it was the exact same pendant. His eyes darkened with suspicion. This cannot be coincidence. Back at the apartment, Naomi carefully opened another folder from Lorraine's box. Inside sat a hospital intake form from 20 years ago. One name had been blacked out completely. But another line remained visible. Next of kin, Thomas Hayes. Naomi looked up instantly. Hayes. Lorraine nodded slowly. Your mother worked directly for the Hayes family before the accident. Evelyn gripped the bedsheet hard. Stop talking. Naomi's voice shook now. Mama, who is Thomas Hayes? Evelyn looked terrified. Truly terrified. Before she could answer, Naomi's cracked phone suddenly rang again. Marcus Reed. Naomi hesitated. Then answered quietly. Miss Carter, Marcus said calmly, Mr. Hayes would like to ask you a few questions privately. Naomi looked around the apartment with shame burning in her chest. Peeling paint. Empty medicine bottles. Water stains. Everything she tried hiding from rich people. I cannot leave my mother. Marcus paused briefly. We can send a doctor. Evelyn immediately shook her head. No, too fast. Too afraid. Naomi noticed it. Jordan meanwhile drove through heavy rain inside the back seat of a black SUV. The city lights reflected against the window beside him. His assistant handed him another recovered document. Jordan scanned it silently before stopping at one line. Child survivor, identity sealed. Jordan looked up slowly. Who sealed it? Marcus swallowed carefully. The signature was removed. Tiny hope flickered inside the investigation now. Tiny. Fragile. Dangerous. Back at the apartment, Lorraine leaned closer toward Naomi and whispered softly, there was a little girl after the leak. Somebody powerful made sure nobody could find her. Naomi stared silently at the pendant in her hand. Her fingers trembled harder now. Suddenly someone knocked hard downstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed up the hallway. Evelyn's face drained of color instantly. Lorraine rushed to close the storage box. Naomi moved toward the cracked window carefully. Outside, a black luxury car had stopped beside the building. And standing near it under the rain, was Sabrina Monroe. Sabrina Monroe slowly removed her sunglasses under the rain. The black SUV headlights cut across the broken apartment building like sharp white knives. Naomi froze near the window upstairs. Her stomach tightened instantly. Evelyn Carter looked terrified on the bed. She found us, Evelyn whispered weakly. Lorraine grabbed Naomi's arm hard. Do not let her inside. But downstairs, Sabrina already walked through the entrance with 2 security guards behind her. Elegant coat. Perfect makeup. Cold eyes. The entire hallway smelled like expensive perfume and wet concrete. Naomi stepped back as hard knocking echoed against the apartment door. Open this door now, Sabrina snapped. Evelyn began coughing again violently. Naomi looked between her sick mother and the storage box filled with hidden records. Fear swallowed her whole. Jordan Hayes meanwhile sat silently inside his moving SUV several streets away. Marcus Reed handed him another recovered file. Sir. This employee transfer record was altered after the accident. Jordan's expression darkened. Who signed it? Marcus hesitated. Sabrina Monroe. Silence filled the car instantly. Back inside the apartment, the door burst open before Naomi could stop it. Sabrina stepped inside slowly, looking around with disgust at the leaking ceiling and cracked walls. Her eyes landed immediately on the dusty storage box sitting open on the table. Her face changed for one dangerous second. Tiny. Quick. But Naomi saw it. So this is where the lies started, Sabrina said coldly. Lorraine stood protectively in front of the box. Leave the girl alone. Sabrina laughed softly. Girl. She looked directly at Naomi now. She is a manipulator pretending to be a victim. Naomi's eyes filled with tears instantly. I never asked for any of this. Sabrina stepped closer. Then stop chasing rich people. One of the neighbors slowly appeared in the hallway. Then another. Phones already lifting. Whispering spreading. Naomi felt humiliation crawl over her skin all over again. Sabrina knew exactly what she was doing. Tell them, Sabrina said loudly to the crowd outside the door. Tell them how she followed Jordan Hayes around like a desperate girl begging for attention. Naomi shook her head quickly. That is not true. Then why do you keep appearing near him? Sabrina fired back instantly. Silence crushed the room again. Evelyn tried to sit up weakly. Please, stop this, Sabrina ignored her completely. She pointed suddenly toward the old files. Those papers were stolen from Hayes Industrial Archives. Naomi stared at her in shock. No, Sabrina's voice became sharper. Possession of company records is enough to involve police. The neighbors gasped softly outside. Naomi's breathing became uneven. I did not steal anything. Poor people always say that, Sabrina replied coldly. Emotional pain flashed across Naomi's face immediately. Lorraine stepped forward angrily. You are lying. Sabrina turned slowly toward her. Careful, Lorraine. You lost your position once already. Lorraine fell silent instantly. Fear. Real fear. Naomi noticed it. Another humiliation wave crashed over her. The rich woman controlled everybody with one sentence. One threat. One look. Then Sabrina suddenly spotted the silver flower pendant beside the papers. Her expression froze again for half a second. Where did you get that? Naomi instinctively grabbed the pendant tightly. It belonged to my mother. Sabrina's jaw tightened slightly. Too quickly. Too nervously. Tiny hope flickered inside Naomi for the first time. Jordan arrived downstairs moments later just as security guards blocked the apartment entrance from gathering neighbors. Rain poured harder now. Marcus leaned closer. Sir, Sabrina entered 5 minutes ago. Jordan stepped from the SUV calmly. Do not let anyone remove documents from that apartment. Upstairs, Sabrina heard footsteps approaching in the hallway. Panic flashed behind her eyes before disappearing again. You should think carefully, she warned Naomi quietly now. Some truths ruin lives. Naomi's voice cracked softly. Mine is already ruined. For one brief second, even the neighbors outside looked uncomfortable. One elderly woman lowered her phone slowly. Another whispered, maybe the girl is telling the truth. Tiny hope. Tiny. Fragile. Dangerous. But Sabrina immediately turned back toward the crowd. She is trying to trap the Hayes family for money. The hallway exploded with whispers again. Naomi's humiliation deepened instantly. Evelyn suddenly cried out from the bed. Stop hurting my daughter. The entire apartment fell silent. Sabrina slowly turned toward Evelyn. Daughter, she repeated carefully. Wrong word. Wrong reaction. Jordan stepped into the doorway at that exact moment. His eyes moved from Sabrina, to the pendant, to the open hospital records on the table. Then he noticed one missing page torn violently from the file. Marcus leaned beside him quietly. Sir, Jordan slowly picked up another paper half hidden under the box. His expression changed instantly. The document carried Naomi's full birth name. And under the parents section, somebody had tried to black out the surname Hayes. Jordan Hayes stared silently at the damaged birth document in his hand. Rain hammered against the apartment windows while everybody inside froze. Naomi's full name remained visible beneath the black marker stains. Naomi Carter Hayes. Sabrina Monroe moved first. Too fast. Too nervous. She stepped forward and tried grabbing the paper from Jordan's hand immediately. That file means nothing, she snapped sharply. Jordan pulled the document away before she could touch it. His voice stayed calm. Dangerous calm. Then why are you shaking? Silence exploded through the tiny apartment. Even the neighbors outside stopped whispering for a second. Naomi stood near the kitchen table clutching the silver flower pendant against her chest. Her hands trembled badly now. She did not understand why the surname Hayes sat beneath her name. She barely understood her own breathing anymore. Evelyn Carter began crying quietly from the bed. I never wanted this to happen. Jordan slowly looked toward her. Mrs. Carter, who changed this record? Before Evelyn could answer, Sabrina interrupted instantly. This woman is confused. Sick. She does not even know what she is saying. Lorraine suddenly stepped forward. No. I remember that pendant. Everyone turned toward her. Lorraine pointed shakily toward Naomi's necklace. Thomas Hayes gave it to Evelyn after the factory fire. Jordan's eyes darkened immediately. My father? Sabrina's face lost color for the first time. Real fear now. Tiny. Sharp. Impossible to hide. Marcus Reed quietly removed another paper from the folder he carried. Sir, there is more. He handed Jordan a restored hospital intake form recovered from old archives. One section remained damaged. But another line had survived. Child temporarily registered under Carter name for protection. The room fell completely silent. One neighbor outside whispered softly, protection from who? Naomi stared at the paper like her entire life had suddenly become a stranger. Mama, her voice cracked, what does this mean? Evelyn covered her mouth and cried harder. Sabrina quickly regained control of her expression. Old records can be forged. Jordan looked directly at her now. You signed the employee transfer files after the accident. Sabrina folded her arms tightly. I managed paperwork for hundreds of workers. Then explain why Naomi's original surname was hidden. Sabrina said nothing. Emotional pressure filled the apartment instantly. Tiny hope flickered across Naomi's broken face for the first time. Somebody finally questioned the rich woman instead of her. Marcus suddenly connected a small portable drive into his tablet. Sir, the original security footage was partially restored. Sabrina's head snapped toward him immediately. Too quickly. Marcus pressed play. Grainy footage appeared. Smoke. Panic. Workers running through the factory hallway years ago. Then Evelyn appeared on screen carrying a little girl wrapped in a blanket. The silver flower pendant hung clearly around the child's neck. Jordan leaned closer silently. The timestamp froze everybody in place. Then another figure appeared briefly behind Evelyn. Sabrina Monroe. The apartment became dead quiet. Even Sabrina stopped breathing for a second. Why were you there? Jordan asked quietly. Sabrina forced a laugh. I came to help evacuate workers. But the footage continued. Sabrina grabbed a folder from a burning office before leaving the hallway. Marcus paused the video carefully. The folder label matches the sealed identity records. Silence crashed into the room harder than thunder outside. Naomi slowly backed away from Sabrina now like she was seeing her for the first time. You knew. Sabrina raised her voice suddenly. You do not understand anything. Then explain it, Jordan replied sharply. One elderly neighbor lowered her phone completely now. Another whispered, that poor girl was telling the truth. Tiny hope grew stronger. Dangerous now. If you think Sabrina is hiding something even bigger, comment who you believe she was protecting all these years. Sabrina suddenly pointed toward Naomi again desperately. Even if she is connected to your family, she still embarrassed your company. Jordan's expression hardened instantly. She cleaned tables to feed her sick mother while people mocked her. His eyes moved toward Naomi carefully. That is not shameful. Naomi nearly cried hearing somebody defend her for the first time. But the evidence still felt incomplete. Marcus zoomed into the recovered footage again. There was one missing section. 37 seconds erased completely. Someone cut part of the video, Marcus said quietly. Jordan looked toward Sabrina immediately. Sabrina stayed silent now. Too silent. Then Naomi noticed something else inside the damaged storage box. A folded letter hidden beneath the hospital files. Old. Burned at the corners. Her hands shook as she opened it slowly. The first line made Jordan freeze completely. To Thomas Hayes, your daughter survived the fire. Before anybody could speak again, Marcus's phone suddenly rang. His expression changed instantly after answering. Sir, he whispered carefully. The archive witness is missing. At that exact moment, Sabrina slowly stepped backward toward the apartment door. And Jordan realized she was terrified because the final piece of truth was still out there. Marcus lowered the phone slowly. The apartment felt smaller now. Heavy. Dangerous. Rainwater dripped from Naomi Carter's torn sleeves onto the cracked floor while Jordan Hayes still held the burned letter in one hand and the silver flower pendant in the other. Sabrina Monroe quietly moved toward the hallway door again. Jordan noticed immediately. Nobody leaves, he said calmly. His voice was low. But the entire room obeyed it. Sabrina froze. Naomi stood beside the old kitchen chair, breathing unevenly. She still looked like somebody waiting to be punished. Not protected. Not believed. Jordan looked toward her carefully for the first time without suspicion in his eyes. Sit down, he said softly. Naomi hesitated. Her fingers tightened around her old bag. I am fine. But she nearly collapsed from exhaustion before finishing the sentence. Jordan stepped forward instinctively and caught her arm before she hit the floor. Silence spread across the apartment instantly. Naomi looked shocked by the gesture itself. Like nobody had reached for her in years. Jordan slowly released her arm the second she steadied herself again. Respectful. Careful. You have not eaten today, he said quietly. Naomi lowered her eyes. My mother needed medicine first. That answer hit the room harder than shouting. Even Marcus looked away for a second. Sabrina rolled her eyes sharply. This performance is getting pathetic. Jordan turned toward her immediately. Enough. One word. Cold. Final. Sabrina's lips tightened. Tiny fear flashed across her face again. Jordan removed his jacket slowly and placed it over the back of Naomi's chair. You are shaking. Naomi stared at the expensive fabric like it belonged to another world entirely. People do not help me for free, she whispered painfully. Jordan paused after hearing that. Something in her voice felt old. Familiar. Broken in the same place as a memory he could not fully reach yet. Not everybody wants something from you, he answered quietly. Naomi looked away quickly before tears escaped her eyes. Emotional silence filled the apartment again. Evelyn Carter coughed weakly from the bed nearby. Jordan immediately walked toward her. She needs proper treatment. Naomi panicked instantly. No hospital will wait for more payment. Jordan looked toward Marcus. Call St. Gabriel Medical Center. Cover the emergency balance tonight. Naomi's eyes widened immediately. No, everybody looked at her. She stepped backward nervously. I cannot owe rich people anything. Jordan answered gently this time. It is not charity. Then what is it? Naomi asked. Jordan looked down at the pendant in his hand again before speaking. A reason to keep asking questions. Sabrina crossed her arms tightly. You are letting a cleaner manipulate you. Jordan slowly faced her. She cleaned floors while your family lied for 20 years. Sabrina's expression cracked for half a second. Tiny. But Naomi noticed it. That fear. That guilt. Somewhere inside Sabrina already knew the truth was moving closer. Marcus suddenly opened the restored footage again on his tablet. This time Jordan paused on one small frame. A child's arm visible beneath the blanket during the factory fire. A small crescent-shaped birthmark near the wrist. Jordan's breathing slowed immediately. Naomi unconsciously touched the exact same mark hidden beneath her sleeve. Jordan noticed. So did Sabrina. The room became deadly quiet. Where did you get that mark? Jordan asked carefully. Naomi looked confused. I was born with it. Evelyn suddenly began crying again from the bed. Thomas used to call it the moon sign, Sabrina interrupted loudly. Enough. She is confusing old stories with reality. But her voice sounded thinner now. Less powerful. Naomi looked toward Jordan nervously. Why are you looking at me like that? Jordan did not answer immediately. He only stared at the pendant again. Then at the faded family photograph lying beside the burned letter. The young woman in the picture wore the same necklace. Same eyes. Same birthmark. Tiny hope entered Naomi's chest for the first time. Fragile. Terrifying. Jordan carefully placed the pendant back into Naomi's hand instead of keeping it. Do not lose this again, he said softly. Naomi looked stunned. Nobody had ever returned anything valuable to her before. Outside, luxury cars slowly arrived near the apartment building entrance. Black headlights cutting through rain and mud. Sabrina noticed first. Her face lost color instantly. No, she whispered under her breath. Marcus checked another message quickly. Sir, he said quietly. The witness from the archive is here. Then a weak voice suddenly came from the apartment doorway. An elderly man stood there trembling under the rain. His eyes locked onto Naomi instantly. And with tears running down his face, he whispered, I know what happened the night your father died. The old man stood frozen in the doorway while rainwater dripped from his coat onto the apartment floor. Everybody stared at him now. Naomi Carter slowly stepped backward beside the cracked kitchen wall, confused and trembling. Jordan Hayes did not move at all. But his eyes changed. Harder. Sharper. Like something buried for years had suddenly started breathing again. Who are you? Jordan asked quietly. The old man swallowed painfully before answering. Walter Reed. I worked security at the Hayes textile warehouse 20 years ago. Sabrina Monroe's face lost color immediately. He is lying, she snapped too quickly. Walter pointed at her with shaking fingers. Your mother paid people to stay silent. Silence exploded across the apartment. Even Marcus looked stunned now. Naomi stared between them helplessly. What are they talking about? Nobody answered her immediately. Evelyn Carter suddenly began coughing violently from the bed again. Walter, she whispered weakly. You promised never to come back. Walter's eyes filled with guilt. I tried to protect the child. Jordan slowly looked toward Naomi after hearing that word. Child. Naomi shook her head immediately. No, no, this has nothing to do with me. But even she no longer believed it completely. Walter reached carefully into his old coat pocket and removed a faded photograph wrapped in plastic. The edges were burned. Half ruined by time. He handed it toward Jordan with trembling hands. Jordan stared at the image silently. A younger Thomas Hayes stood beside a frightened woman holding a little girl wrapped in a blanket. The silver flower pendant hung around the child's neck. Naomi's breathing stopped for a second. That necklace, Jordan whispered. Naomi instinctively touched the pendant again. Same necklace. Same design. Same scratch near the clasp. Sabrina stepped forward immediately. That proves nothing. Walter looked directly at her. Your family destroyed hospital records after the fire. Jordan's jaw tightened instantly. Marcus slowly opened another digital file on his tablet. Sir, he said carefully. The birth records from St. Mercy Hospital were altered the same week as the warehouse fire. Naomi looked completely lost now. Why would anybody erase records about me? Nobody answered immediately. That silence hurt more than shouting. Jordan carefully studied the back of the photograph. A sentence written in faded ink barely remained visible. Protect her until I return. Jordan closed his eyes briefly after reading it. Like he had heard those exact words somewhere before. Sabrina moved closer suddenly. Aggressive again. Desperate now. Jordan, do not let these people manipulate you with old lies. Jordan slowly lifted his eyes toward her. Calm. Cold. Then explain why your family lawyer signed these altered documents. Sabrina froze instantly. Tiny fear crossed her face again. Walter spoke quietly now. Thomas Hayes wanted to acknowledge the child before he died. Naomi's knees nearly gave out beside the chair. What child? She whispered weakly. Evelyn finally broke down crying. You, she whispered painfully toward Naomi. You were never supposed to grow up this way. The apartment fell completely silent. Naomi looked like somebody standing inside a nightmare she could not wake from. Jordan stepped closer carefully but did not touch her this time. Respectful distance. Quiet protection. Did your mother ever tell you who your father was? Naomi slowly shook her head. Tears rolled down her face silently. She only said powerful people ruined our lives. That sentence hit Jordan hard. Because he already knew one terrible truth now. Somebody inside the Hayes family had hidden Naomi from the world for 20 years. Marcus suddenly enlarged another restored frame from the old warehouse footage. This time everybody saw it clearly. Sabrina Monroe's mother standing near the fire exit. The night records disappeared. Sabrina immediately lunged toward the tablet. Turn that off. Jordan grabbed the device first. Do not touch it. His voice became ice cold now. Sabrina stepped backward slowly. For the first time, she looked afraid of losing everything. Walter lowered his head painfully. Thomas died trying to protect the truth. Naomi covered her mouth as tears shook her entire body. Jordan looked back at the photograph again. Then at Naomi's face. Same eyes. Same expression from the child in the picture. Same crescent birthmark. Same pendant. The pieces were no longer random anymore. Tiny hope entered Naomi's broken expression for the first time. Fragile. Dangerous. Jordan turned toward Marcus immediately. Find every sealed file connected to the warehouse fire. Marcus nodded quickly. Sabrina suddenly grabbed her phone with shaking hands and moved toward the hallway. Jordan noticed instantly. Who are you calling? Sabrina forced a smile. Nobody. But Walter's face suddenly turned pale with fear. No, he whispered. If she warns them now, the last witness will disappear too. Jordan's eyes narrowed instantly. What last witness? Walter looked toward Naomi with tears filling his eyes again. Then he whispered the sentence that made the entire apartment go silent. The woman who raised Naomi was never her real mother. Walter's final sentence shattered the apartment into silence. Naomi Carter stood completely frozen beside the kitchen table while rain hammered against the broken window outside. What do you mean she was not my real mother? Naomi whispered weakly. Nobody answered immediately. Jordan Hayes slowly turned toward Walter Reed. Say everything. Walter's hands shook violently now. After the warehouse fire, a baby disappeared. Sabrina Monroe stepped forward instantly. Stop talking. Her voice cracked this time. Real fear. Real panic. Jordan looked toward Marcus without breaking eye contact with Walter. Lock the doors. Marcus nodded immediately. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. Tighter. Dangerous. Walter swallowed hard. Thomas Hayes wanted to bring the child home. But somebody inside the mansion refused. Naomi's breathing became uneven. Evelyn Carter cried quietly from the bed. I was only supposed to hide her for a few weeks. Naomi looked toward Evelyn in disbelief. You lied to me my whole life. Evelyn shook her head desperately. I loved you like my own daughter. Naomi's tears fell instantly after hearing that. Pain. Confusion. Gratitude. Betrayal. All at once. Sabrina suddenly grabbed her purse aggressively. This entire story is nonsense. Jordan blocked the doorway before she could leave. Calm. Controlled. Terrifying. Sit down. Sabrina stared at him. You cannot force me. Jordan answered quietly. No. But I can ask why your family erased hospital records the same week a child vanished. Silence exploded again. Walter slowly handed Marcus another envelope. Old documents. Burned around the edges. Marcus carefully opened them on the table. Naomi stared at the papers without understanding anything yet. Jordan's eyes narrowed immediately. This signature, Marcus nodded slowly. It belongs to Sabrina's father. Sabrina snapped instantly. Those papers are fake. But even she sounded unsure now. Jordan noticed. Tiny cracks everywhere now. Tiny lies collapsing one by one. Suddenly a loud knock echoed from downstairs. Marcus checked the security feed on his phone quickly. Sir, reporters are outside. Sabrina's expression changed immediately. Naomi looked terrified. Please. I do not want people looking at me again. Jordan looked toward her carefully. Nobody touches you tonight. Soft words. Quiet protection. But Sabrina immediately used that moment. See, she shouted toward Naomi. He only protects you because he thinks you are useful. Naomi's face fell instantly again. Tiny hope crushed. Sabrina stepped closer now. You smell like cheap soap and hospital medicine. You think rich people suddenly care about girls like you? Naomi lowered her eyes painfully. Old humiliation returned all at once. Jordan's voice cut through the room immediately. Enough. Sabrina turned toward him sharply. You are risking your family name for her. Jordan answered calmly. Maybe my family name deserves the truth. That sentence silenced the entire room again. Walter suddenly pointed toward the envelope on the table. There is another page missing. Marcus checked quickly. He is right. Jordan looked toward Sabrina immediately. She stepped backward instinctively. Too late. He noticed. Where is the last page? Sabrina forced a laugh. How would I know? But her fingers tightened around her purse. Marcus noticed it too. Tiny suspicion. Tiny crack. Naomi quietly wiped tears from her face. I never asked for any of this. Jordan looked toward her carefully again. That is exactly why I believe you. Tiny hope returned for one fragile second. Then another obstacle hit immediately. The apartment door burst open downstairs. Security voices echoed through the hallway. Sabrina smiled slowly now. Dangerous again. Your reporters are not the only visitors. Marcus looked stunned after checking another message. Sir, the Hayes family board members are here. Jordan's jaw tightened immediately. Public pressure. Wealthy witnesses. Powerful people. Exactly what Sabrina wanted. Naomi stepped backward in fear. I cannot face more people. Sabrina moved closer to her softly now like a snake preparing to strike. Then sign this. She pulled folded papers from her purse. Take money. Leave quietly. End this story tonight. Naomi stared at the papers with trembling hands. Jordan watched silently from across the room. Testing. Waiting. Sabrina lowered her voice sharply. If you refuse, your mother loses medical support tomorrow. Naomi's entire body froze. Emotional trap. Cruel. Precise. Evelyn began crying harder from the bed. Do not sign anything. Naomi looked trapped between fear and survival. Jordan noticed her shaking hands immediately. Then something small slipped from Sabrina's purse onto the floor unnoticed by almost everybody. A hospital intake card. Marcus picked it up slowly first. His eyes widened instantly. Sir, Jordan took the card carefully. Then the room went silent again after he read the name printed across the top line. Naomi Hayes. The hospital boardroom fell silent the second Jordan Hayes lifted the intake card from the floor. Naomi Hayes. The name sat there like a bomb nobody wanted to touch. Sabrina Monroe forced a laugh immediately. Anybody can fake a card. But her voice shook now. Tiny cracks spreading everywhere. Jordan looked at the card again carefully. Same hospital. Same year as the warehouse fire. Same missing records Marcus had uncovered hours earlier. Naomi stood near the doorway trembling while reporters gathered outside the building downstairs. Why does that name sound familiar to everybody except me? She whispered painfully. Nobody answered immediately. Evelyn Carter looked away from her bed in shame. Walter Reed lowered his head. Jordan remained calm. Too calm. Dangerous calm. We are done talking inside this apartment, he said quietly. Marcus immediately understood. The board meeting is still happening at the Hayes mansion tonight. Sabrina's face tightened instantly. You cannot bring her there. Jordan slowly looked toward her. Watch me. Cut to 1 hour later. The Hayes mansion glowed with golden lights while luxury cars lined the circular driveway outside. Wealthy board members. Lawyers. Family friends. Reporters waiting beyond the gates. Naomi stepped out of Jordan's black car slowly, still wearing faded shoes and the same worn jacket from work. The contrast hurt to look at. Rich women whispered instantly the moment they saw her. That is the girl from the restaurant. The smelly waitress. Why is Jordan bringing her here? Naomi lowered her eyes immediately. Old shame returning. Jordan noticed. He quietly stepped beside her instead of ahead of her. Small gesture. Powerful protection. Sabrina entered through the main doors confidently again, already rebuilding her mask. Do not embarrass yourself tonight, she whispered coldly toward Naomi while cameras flashed outside. Naomi swallowed hard but stayed silent. The grand boardroom inside looked terrifying to her. Crystal chandeliers. Long marble table. Family portraits covering the walls. People in expensive suits staring openly at her like she did not belong there. Jordan remained standing beside the head chair without sitting down. Quiet authority filled the room instantly. Marcus connected a laptop to the large screen at the far end of the hall. The screen stayed black for now. Waiting. Tension everywhere. Walter sat near the corner trembling with fear. Evelyn arrived slowly in a wheelchair, wrapped in blankets. Naomi rushed toward her immediately. You should not be here. Evelyn grabbed her hand tightly. You deserve the truth. Sabrina slammed a folder onto the table suddenly. Before this circus begins, everybody deserves to know this girl has manipulated multiple people tonight. Sharp whispers spread across the room immediately. Naomi stepped backward in shock. Sabrina continued aggressively. She entered our company event pretending to be innocent. She stole sympathy from Jordan Hayes and now suddenly appears with fake documents. Naomi's voice cracked instantly. I never asked for any of this. Sabrina pointed toward her sharply. Then why are you here? Silence. Heavy. Cruel. Jordan finally spoke. Because I brought her. Every whisper stopped immediately. Sabrina forced another smile. Jordan, emotions are clouding your judgment. Jordan calmly placed the silver flower pendant onto the marble table. The room went quiet instantly after several older board members recognized it. Tiny reactions. Tiny fear. Naomi noticed. Jordan watched every face carefully. Interesting, he said quietly. Some people here already know this necklace. Nobody answered him. A child's voice suddenly broke the silence near the doorway. Little Ava, the daughter of one board member, pointed innocently toward Naomi. That lady looks like the girl in the old hallway picture upstairs. Everybody froze for one terrible second. Sabrina immediately interrupted loudly. Enough. This is becoming ridiculous. But Jordan did not look away from her anymore. Then explain why your father's signature appears on altered hospital records. Silence exploded across the room. One older board member slowly removed his glasses. What records? Marcus lifted another sealed envelope carefully. Still unopened. Still hidden. The final pages. Tiny hope entered Naomi's chest again. Fragile. Dangerous. Jordan looked toward the room slowly. Tonight is not about rumors, he said calmly. It is about truth. Around the mansion, cameras flashed outside the windows. Inside, nobody moved anymore. Not after Marcus placed the restored security footage beside the unopened records. Sabrina's breathing became uneven now. Naomi noticed it immediately. Fear. Real fear. If you are watching this story right now, tell me honestly, who deserves justice here? And what do you think Sabrina is still hiding? The tension inside the room thickened again instantly. Walter suddenly stood up trembling. I cannot stay silent anymore. Sabrina snapped toward him violently. Sit down. Jordan stepped between them immediately. Quiet authority. Controlled power. He will speak. Tiny hope spread through the room again. Then the final obstacle hit. Sabrina pointed directly at Naomi with tears suddenly filling her eyes. You are destroying this family. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. One woman whispered, what if she really is lying? Naomi's face collapsed again under the pressure. Cameras outside kept flashing. Rich people whispered. Nobody knew who to believe anymore. Then Jordan slowly picked up the remote control near the black screen. Marcus placed the final sealed documents directly in front of Sabrina. Walter inhaled shakily beside the table. And the entire mansion went silent after Jordan finally said, before you judge her, watch this. The giant screen flickered once. Then the restored security footage finally began to play. The Hayes Mansion boardroom became completely silent. Naomi stood frozen beside Evelyn's wheelchair while Jordan kept one hand calmly resting on the marble table near the silver flower pendant. On the screen, the footage showed the charity gala from 3 nights earlier. Naomi appeared carrying trays quietly through the crowded ballroom while guests laughed and drank champagne. Then the camera angle shifted. Sabrina Monroe suddenly stepped directly into Naomi's path. Deliberately. Clear as daylight. Gasps spread across the room immediately. Sabrina's voice echoed from the footage. People like you should stay invisible. The next clip played instantly after. Sabrina secretly pouring expensive perfume onto Naomi's old uniform while several women laughed nearby. Naomi lowered her eyes painfully as the room watched the humiliation unfold again. One older board member whispered softly, "My God." Sabrina immediately stood up. "This proves nothing." Jordan never raised his voice. "Sit down." She froze. The next piece of footage appeared. Naomi trying to explain herself while security grabbed her arms near the ballroom exit. Then came the part nobody expected. Little Ava walking toward Naomi innocently with a napkin. "You smell like flowers," the child said softly in the video. "Like the lady in Grandpa's old picture." The entire room went silent again. Jordan slowly lifted the old framed photograph Marcus had recovered from storage earlier that night. Beside the picture sat the silver flower pendant. Same symbol. Same woman. Same eyes. Naomi stared at the photograph trembling. The woman in the picture looked almost exactly like her mother. Sabrina panicked immediately. Coincidences happen every day. Walter Reed suddenly stood up shaking violently. "No," he whispered. "Not this one." Every eye turned toward him. Walter swallowed hard before speaking again. 24 years ago, a woman named Naomi Carter worked inside this mansion. Evelyn closed her eyes in shame. Tears slipped down her cheeks silently. Walter continued painfully. She fell in love with Elijah Hayes, Jordan's older brother. Shock exploded across the room. Naomi stopped breathing for a second. Jordan remained completely still. Sabrina's face lost color immediately. "That is a lie," she snapped. Walter shook his head. "You told everybody she stole money and disappeared. But she did not." Marcus opened the sealed hospital records carefully. "Because she was pregnant." Silence. Pure silence. Phones slowly lowered around the room. Nobody whispered anymore. Naomi's knees almost gave out beneath her. Jordan stepped closer quietly without touching her. Supporting her without words. Marcus placed another document beside the photograph. Birth records. One name circled in red ink. Naomi Carter Hayes. Sabrina lunged forward instantly. "Those papers are fake." Jordan finally looked directly at her again. Calm. Cold. Certain. "Then why did your father sign the hospital transfer forms?" Another gasp hit the room immediately. Marcus revealed the final page. A hidden payment record made years ago from the Monroe family account directly to the hospital administrator who altered Naomi's birth records after her mother died. Evelyn began crying openly now. "We thought the baby was gone." Naomi covered her mouth, shaking violently. Tears streamed silently down her face. She could barely stand anymore. Sabrina backed away slowly. "I did this to protect the family." Jordan's voice sharpened for the first time all night. "You destroyed a child's life." Public silence crashed down over the mansion. The same guests who mocked Naomi days earlier now stared at her with horror and shame. One woman quietly removed the video she had recorded earlier. Another lowered her head completely. A board member whispered, "She belongs here." Naomi finally looked up at Jordan through tears. "My mother worked here." Jordan nodded slowly. "She saved my brother's life during the warehouse fire." Evelyn grabbed Naomi's trembling hand tightly. "Your mother begged us never to abandon you." Sabrina suddenly pointed toward Naomi desperately. She still lied about who she was. But before anybody could react, little Ava stepped forward holding a folded letter she had quietly taken from the old photo frame upstairs. "I found this hidden behind the picture." Marcus carefully opened the yellowed paper. Elijah Hayes' signature sat at the bottom beside one sentence that changed everything. "If anything happens to me, protect Naomi and our daughter." The room exploded into shocked whispers again. Naomi's face collapsed completely as the truth finally hit her. Jordan slowly turned toward Sabrina while the entire boardroom stared at her in disgust. Then he asked the one question she could not answer. How long were you planning to keep her buried? The entire Hayes Mansion boardroom stayed frozen after Jordan's question landed like thunder. Sabrina Monroe stood in the center of the room surrounded by silence. Nobody defended her anymore. Nobody even looked at her the same way. Her expensive white dress suddenly looked cold under the chandelier lights. Naomi still held the old letter against her chest with trembling hands. Tears rolled quietly down her face. Not from shame anymore. From truth. Sabrina tried one last time to regain control. You are all forgetting who built this family's reputation, she snapped. I protected this mansion for years. Evelyn slowly stood from her chair for the first time that night. Her voice shook with disappointment. No. You protected your greed. The room fell silent again. Jordan stepped forward calmly. Controlled. Powerful. Marcus, he said quietly. Call the family lawyers. Sabrina's face changed instantly. Jordan, you cannot be serious. I am completely serious. Marcus nodded immediately and walked toward the hallway with the files in his hands. Sabrina rushed toward Jordan desperately. You are throwing away everything for a maid. Naomi lowered her eyes painfully after hearing the word again. But this time Jordan answered before the silence could swallow her. She was never a maid to this family, he said. She was stolen from it. Gasps spread across the boardroom once more. Several guests slowly stepped away from Sabrina as if they finally understood who she truly was. The same women who laughed at Naomi's smell days earlier now avoided Naomi's eyes completely. One older guest whispered softly, we humiliated her for nothing. Little Ava walked quietly toward Naomi and hugged her hand. You smell like my grandma's flowers, she whispered innocently. Naomi broke down crying softly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just years of pain finally cracking open. Jordan looked toward the board members sitting along the marble table. Effective immediately, Sabrina Monroe is removed from all Hayes Foundation operations. Sabrina's face went pale. You cannot do this. Jordan did not blink. The evidence already did. Marcus returned carrying additional documents. Financial records. Hospital transfers. Signed agreements hidden for decades. Every paper connected back to Sabrina's family. Walter Reed finally spoke again, his voice heavy with guilt. We let an innocent child suffer because we were afraid of scandal. Evelyn slowly walked toward Naomi. Her hands shook badly. Your mother begged me to protect you before she died, she whispered through tears. I failed her. Naomi looked at her silently for several seconds before answering softly, I spent my whole life wondering why nobody wanted us. The room shattered emotionally again. Even security guards lowered their eyes. Sabrina suddenly grabbed her purse tightly. This family will regret humiliating me. But nobody moved toward her anymore. Nobody followed her side. Jordan calmly placed the silver flower pendant onto the table beside Elijah Hayes' photograph. Your lies ended tonight. One board member cleared his throat nervously. The inheritance records. Marcus opened the final folder slowly. According to Elijah Hayes' signed trust documents, Naomi Carter Hayes remains the legal surviving heir connected to his estate. The room exploded into whispers again. Sabrina nearly collapsed backward into her chair. Naomi stared at the papers in disbelief. I do not want anyone's money, she whispered weakly. Jordan looked directly at her for the first time without distance between them. This was never about money. Silence filled the room again. Deep. Heavy. Emotional. Then Jordan turned toward the crowd surrounding Naomi. Every person here watched her beg for dignity, he said quietly. And none of you stopped it. Several guests looked ashamed immediately. Phones disappeared. Smiles vanished. One woman stepped toward Naomi carefully. I am sorry. Another guest lowered his head silently. The same hallway where Naomi was dragged out days earlier now stood open behind her. No guards blocking her path. No laughter. No whispers. Just silence and regret. Marcus handed Naomi an official folder carefully. Inside rested her restored birth certificate bearing her real name beside the Hayes family crest. Her hands shook so hard she almost dropped it. Evelyn gently held her arm. "You belong here," she whispered. Naomi closed her eyes as tears rolled down again. Jordan looked toward the giant mansion doors. Then back at Naomi. His voice softened for the first time all night. "Your mother lost her home because people chose pride over truth." He extended his hand calmly toward her. "I will not let that happen again." The massive mansion doors slowly opened behind him. Warm golden light spilled into the dark boardroom hallway. Naomi stood frozen between the pain she survived and the life waiting ahead of her. Then little Ava smiled up at her and whispered softly, "You are finally home." The giant mansion doors stayed open as warm golden light spilled across the marble floor. Naomi stood frozen in the doorway holding her restored birth certificate with trembling fingers while little Ava smiled beside her. Behind Naomi, the same guests who once covered their noses around her now stood silent with shame. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody whispered. Jordan waited patiently a few steps ahead of her. Calm. Steady. Safe. "You do not have to be afraid anymore," he said softly. Naomi looked at the massive chandelier above the mansion entrance. Days earlier, she had been dragged out beneath those same lights while people mocked her smell and called her worthless. Now the entire mansion stood quiet waiting for her to walk in with dignity. Evelyn slowly approached carrying a small wooden box. Her eyes were still red from crying. "Your mother left this before she died," she whispered gently. Naomi carefully opened the box. Inside rested the silver flower pendant, Elijah Hayes' final letter, and one faded photograph of her mother smiling beside the Hayes family garden years ago. Naomi touched the picture carefully like she was touching a life stolen from her. Tears slipped down her face again. But this time they were not tears of humiliation. They were tears of relief. "She never abandoned me," Naomi whispered. Evelyn shook her head immediately. "Never." Jordan quietly guided Naomi farther inside the mansion while staff members lowered their heads respectfully as she passed. The same guards who once blocked her path now stepped aside silently. One older maid placed her hand over her heart. "Welcome home, Miss Hayes." Naomi stopped walking for a second after hearing the name aloud. Her real name. Her true place. Little Ava grabbed her hand tightly and smiled. "I told everybody you smelled like flowers." Naomi laughed softly through tears for the first time in years. Upstairs, doctors finally began proper treatment for Evelyn while Marcus arranged legal protection for Naomi's inheritance rights and family records. Sabrina Monroe disappeared completely from Hayes Foundation leadership within days. No screaming. No revenge. Just consequences. Her social invitations vanished. Her engagement collapsed. Her family name no longer carried respect inside the mansion halls. People stopped defending her once the truth became public. But Naomi did not waste her new life watching Sabrina fall. She focused on healing instead. A week later, Jordan personally drove Naomi back to the small apartment building where she once lived. The cracked hallway still smelled of dust and rainwater. The landlord who once threatened to throw her onto the street lowered his eyes nervously when he saw Jordan standing beside her. Naomi simply smiled quietly. "I came for my mother's blanket," she said. "Nothing more. No cruelty. No revenge. Just dignity." Jordan carried the old worn bag downstairs for her himself. "You kept surviving with almost nothing," he said quietly inside the car. Naomi stared out the window silently before answering. "Poor people learn how to survive quietly." Jordan looked at her for a long moment. You should never have had to. In the weeks that followed, Naomi slowly began rebuilding her life inside the Hayes estate. Not as a servant. Not as someone hidden in shadows. She helped reorganize the Hayes Foundation charity program for struggling single mothers and poor workers across Atlanta. Every time she walked through the mansion halls now, people greeted her with respect instead of disgust. One afternoon, Naomi stood in the garden where her mother once worked years ago. Warm sunlight touched her face gently while Ava played nearby laughing loudly. Jordan approached carrying the silver flower pendant in his hand. "This belongs to you now," he said softly. Naomi looked at the pendant differently this time. No longer as a mystery. No longer as pain. But as proof that truth survived. Jordan carefully placed it into her palm. Their hands touched briefly. Quietly. Gently. No grand romance. Just trust slowly beginning to grow between two wounded people. Evelyn watched them from the balcony with tears in her eyes. Elijah would have been proud, she whispered softly. Naomi looked around the peaceful garden. The same family that once lost her had finally found her again. The same world that mocked her smell now spoke her name with respect. Little Ava suddenly ran toward Naomi laughing. "Come home, Aunt Naomi." Naomi smiled fully at last and opened her arms. In that moment, the mansion no longer felt cold. It felt safe. And somewhere deep inside herself, the frightened poor girl who begged outside those gates finally disappeared. Because the truth may be delayed. But it can never stay buried forever. Do not mock people because they are poor. Do not judge someone by old clothes, tired eyes, or the work they do to survive. Power can hide the truth for years, but kindness remembers. And one day, dignity always finds its way back home.